people can take new resolutions to practice meditation, something that actually we take resolutions, especially new year resolutions, to basically help us grow in our lives, to help us become a better version of ourselves, right? We take new resolutions. And how many of you have been continuing that till now? Anyone?
Taking resolution every year is continuing.
I mean, I like your motivation. So taking the resolution is continuing, but whether we are following it through, through the year, that we may not be sure about. That we may not be sure about. In fact, there is a statistic which says that 90%, 80 to 90% of them drop their new year resolution in the first 2 to 3 weeks, of the year. In the right at the end of the January, you can say almost 80 to 90% of the people drop their resolution. So what is that affecting us? So that is the why is that we are not able to, we want to, sometimes we have good intentions, right? Sometimes we have bad intentions, and that's that's a starting point, and that's really bad. But many times we have good intentions, and most of us would like to think that we are good people, correct? Yes or yes? So we have good intentions. We have good intentions for ourselves. We have good intentions to work, for others. But then many times that good intentions doesn't translate into action. The good intentions, even though, like for example, New Year resolution, it starts off, but then at some point, we become distracted or we don't follow through, and it gets dropped. So what is that? That doesn't allow the good intentions to, to manifest. What is that allows the good? What is that doesn't allow the good intentions to manifest? So we will be talking about this framework called the decision-making framework. And then once we go through this exercise, then we will be able to fit all the pieces together to understand what is that's coming in between. And of course, some of you can already take a guess. Session today is talking about the mind. So what is coming in between? The mind. Anyway, that's just a prelude. Here, we'll do a quick recap of the session, last week's session. Some of you are new. You can just, hear about, as we discuss the recap, you can quickly, hear those points. And then if you have any questions, we can certainly discuss that. So for those of you who are present, what did we discuss last week? Last week.
I'm not the body, I am Atma.
Yeah, very nice. So Rahul comes up with the first point, which is I am not this body, but I am a spirit soul. I am a spiritual being. I am Atma. So that is the first, this is the first fundamental concept or the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, that I have a body, I live in a body, like how I live in an apartment or I live in a home, but I am not the apartment or the home. I can use a car, but I am different than a car. So Krishna describes, so I live in a body, I have a body, but I am different than the body. So Krishna describes the self as a spirit soul or spiritual being, which is categorically different. So there are two kinds of energy. This body is made of which energy? Material energy. And the spiritual being is made of spiritual energy. It's easy. Right? Actually, the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is easy to understand. So, so there are two categories of energy that we see. The energy that we see all around, the matter is already, matter is made of material energy, and matter is dead. For example, the stool, I can knock on the stool, I can kick the stool, but our table, but it's not going to respond back, right? Because it's dead matter. There is no life in the dead matter. But then I cannot do that to a person, because the person has consciousness. So what distinguishes between dead matter and a living being? Atma. But further,
Intelligence.
Intelligence, okay. I'm looking for a particular word. Emotions. Yes, that's close. I mean, everything is close to the correct answer.
Soul.
Yes, Shriyan.
Mind.
Mind, okay.
Soul.
Consciousness, who said that? Sumed. Let's give, it's 10 points for Sumed actually. It's consciousness. It's the presence of consciousness. This table, which is dead matter, doesn't exhibit any consciousness, but I exhibit consciousness, and that includes emotions, intelligence, all these different points you said, and mind as well. So I exhibit consciousness. So that's difference between me, a living being, and dead matter. I exhibit consciousness. Dead matter doesn't exhibit consciousness. Of course, consciousness includes all those things: desires, emotions, feelings, experiences. Experience of happiness and distress, all those things represent consciousness. Okay, nice. And so Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls this body as a yantra. In Sanskrit, what does yantra mean? Machine. Krishna says it's a highly sophisticated machine. So we are seated on this machine, highly sophisticated machine, which is made of this material energy, and we are actually moving about in this world. So this body can be compared to a car or a vehicle, highly sophisticated vehicle, which we are using to move about in this world. And the example that we also talked about is how we can also drive a car, but we don't become the car. We are different than the car, right? So this is the main point of discussion that we had last week. Any other points you remember from last week's discussion, apart from Rahul? Yes.
Soul is eternal.
Soul is eternal.
Mind eternal, no death.
Yes, very nice. So this body is perishable, is destructible, but I, the spiritual being, I am eternal. I am not. I've existed in the past. I'm existing now, and I will continue to exist in the future. So what happens to me, the soul, when the body dies? Do I also die, or what happens to me? Yeah, yeah. So we move on to the next body. In fact, Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, it's a beautiful verse. He says, what is it, sir? Yeah, Nainam Chindanti Shatrani is a good verse, but I'm thinking about
Changing clothes?
no. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatrana muhyati. So Krishna says, as the soul continuously passes, even in this life we are passing through many bodies, from boyhood to youth to old age. Like we have many bodies, right? Like for example, we discussed about Shyam, where is your body when you're 7 years old? It's gone. So we are changing bodies even in this life. According to the science, every 7 years or so, all the cells in the bodies are replaced. So you have a new body. But of course, we are not aware of it, aware of these transformations, but the body is going through rapid transformation. So Krishna says, even in this life, we are changing bodies from boyhood to youth to old age, and similarly, at the time of death, we change to another body. We continue to exist eternally, even after the body perishes. Very nice point. And then yes, Mataji, you had a point.
Yes, so last session was basically who am I, and the answer was like I am not body, I am soul. And there was one example you gave, like a lady kept a bird in the golden cage, and she was very much busy cleaning that cage, but the bird was almost dead. So just like that, we entire life we take care of our body, but we don't take care of our soul.
Very nice. Beautiful. Did everybody hear that?
Yeah.
So do you remember the picture? The picture of an old lady. There was a cage, golden cage, and then there is a bird inside the golden cage. The old lady is actually busy cleaning up the cage, but then if you look at the picture of the bird is almost dying. So this represents the modern civilization. The modern civilization is very good in taking care of the needs of the body and the mind, but actually it fails to even recognize or even acknowledge that there is the self, the soul, which is present in each one of us. I mean, which is our true identity, which is our true self. So we forget to nourish the soul. We forget to nourish ourselves. We take so much pains to nourish the body and the mind, but we forget to nourish ourselves. And so that picture represents our modern day society, and that's why we find so much anomaly in this world. I was talking with somebody about Robin Williams. How many of you have heard about Robin Williams? Of course, he's no more, unfortunately. He was a very famous actor, Robin Williams. He's done a lot of roles. He's won so many awards. He was according to the material calculation, he was at the zenith of success. But still, unfortunately, he committed suicide because he was very depressed inside. Externally, he had everything: money, opulence, awards, fame, glory. He was a really talented actor. But in spite of having all this, he was still very depressed. He was very lonely inside. And because of that, he was feeling void inside. He was empty. He was feeling empty inside. And because of that, unfortunately, he committed suicide. I wish, somebody would have given him Bhagavad Gita. Because that's why that picture represents. We take, especially in this side of the world, the Western world, there's so much of advancement, so much of material comfort. We talked about it in the first session, right? But what we forget is, we forget to take care of ourselves, the soul. And that's why there is so much anomaly in the world today. In spite of all resources, advancement, comfort, still people are not happy. I was talking with some of the students on the way, and I asked them, what is your expectation from the course? And some of them responded, we want peace. I asked them, it's just 1 month in the US. Right. Of course, then one of them said that, I think it was one of them said that, no, I wanted peace and right from India as well. I said, good to know that it's the same thing everywhere. Yes, Rahul.
When I first time went to ISKCON as a student, I only wanted food.
Yeah, that's an attraction. Some people actually, who's the famous personality who walked, yes, who walked actually how many miles? 10 miles. 10 miles to get one plate of food at the Hare Krishna temple. So that's Steve Jobs. So he got a lot of sukriti, by doing that. And, as karma would have it, he was certainly very creative in his field. He's a great entrepreneur. So yes, as Rahul was saying, ISKCON is also known as a kitchen religion. Because that's one way to attract, right? The way to a man or a woman's heart is through the stomach. It's through the stomach. So that's a very wonderful way to attract people. And then it's because when ISKCON is providing, it's not just food, it's actually prasad. So there's a difference between food, which is just like a material, any other material element, but prasad. Prasad means it's sanctified. It's come in contact with Krishna. And that becomes, of course, everybody know the terminology prasadam. Right? When we go to the temple, we get some prasad, right? So what is the difference between an ordinary, like a food at outside and food at the temple? Because it's prasad, because it's imbued with spiritual potency. And we'll talk about that more in the coming weeks. Anyway, those are... So, any other points? I think we covered most of it, I think. Right?
There's one more.
Yeah, yes, Rahul.
After everyone in the room agreed that I am a soul, we entered into understanding the soul, like Satchitananda.
The properties, the intrinsic nature of the soul. What is the intrinsic nature of the soul? It's Sat, Chit and Ananda. So what Sat means? Truth. It also means eternal. So one of the intrinsic property of the nature of the soul is it's eternal. And then Chit means full of knowledge or awareness. So the soul, it's full of knowledge and awareness. And Ananda means bliss. By its own nature, it's happy. The soul is happy. So this is our true nature. But then unfortunately, we have lost connection with our true nature. And like how they gave an example of musk deer, right? Anybody remember this? The example of a musk deer? What is that? Yes, go ahead. You can say.
It searches for the smell of that, but you don't know that it comes from his own.
Yeah, exactly. The musk deer is, of course, it is the source of the musk scent or the fragrance, but the whole life it's searching for the source of this scent without knowing that it is coming from within itself. So it's searching like that. So similarly, we are also searching for happiness externally without knowing that the happiness is right within us. As the phrase goes, happiness is a inside job. Happiness is an inside job. Yeah, very nice. Thank you for that. Any other points anyone want to share? Otherwise, we'll go ahead. So we are in this body, but not this body. This is a recap. Everybody's able to see this thing? Partha, maybe you can come.
Yeah. There is more space in front.
Thank you.
Maybe you can also move this way. So people can sit. Come.
So we are in this body, but not this body. We live in this body, but we are not this body. We have a mind, but we are not the mind that we will talk about today. What is that? Our real identity is that we are Atma, or spiritual being. Of course, we discussed about the difference between Atma and the body. And then we talked about past life memories, near-death experiences, right? There is late Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was a professor at the University of Virginia. He has collected more than 2,000 evidences of children recollecting their past lives. So there's a big research on this, and Dr. Michael Sorbonne, he actually is a cardiologist who has recorded more than 150 of out-of-body and near-death experiences of patients who come to him, in emergency situations and emergency cases. And of course, he is a cardiologist, so people come with a lot of ailments, and people have out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. So he has recorded more than 150 cases. So all, very intelligent and smart people have recorded all these different, which correlate with what Bhagavad Gita is teaching us. So it's not totally out of alignment with science as such, true science as such. So we talked about this, the car is equivalent to the body, the driver is equivalent to the Atma. So the body is like a highly sophisticated vehicle. So these are the constituents of the body, the 5 gross elements. The gross body we see is made of the 5 gross elements: earth, water, fire, air and ether. Krishna says, Bhumir, Apo, Analo, Vayu, Kam, Mano, Buddhir, Evacha, Ahankara, Iti, Me, Bhinna, Prakriti, Ashtada. So he says, there are 5 gross elements. This body, physical body, is made of 5 gross elements. It's called Pancha Mahabhuta, right? Water, fire, air, earth and ether. Ether means space. So this is what the physical body is made of. Now, as much as I have, during when it's cold, then people have multiple layers, right? Especially 2 layers. They will have a shirt and then they will have a coat. So similarly, we also have multiple layers. The soul has multiple layers of coverings. So one is the covering of the gross body, but behind that covering of the gross body is the subtle body. The subtle body is made of, the subtle body can also be called as the mind body. So there are 3 elements in the subtle body. What are those? Mind, intelligence and false ego. Right? What is the Sanskrit term for false ego? Ahankar. Right. Yes, correct. Ahankar. It also can be translated as aham kar. I am my car. Aham means what in Sanskrit? I. Car, of course. Of course, Sanskrit car is different. But I'm just saying, on the funny side, when I identify myself with the car, that is the function of ahankar. So, and finally, there is the soul. The soul has these 3 intrinsic nature, which is Sat, Chit and Ananda. That's a different category of energy, the spiritual energy. So these are the characteristics. We talked about this. The body is made of matter, it's destructible, It's not conscious. The Atma is made of the spiritual energy, higher energy. It's permanent and it's conscious. So we also talked about this in the last slide. There are two coverings for the soul. We just talked about this right now. There's the subtle body or the mind body, and then there is the gross body. And then there is the Atma. So this can be compared to example of computer science example, right? Here the hardware is compared to what? The gross body. The hardware can be compared to the gross body. Now I'm going to, after giving this example, I'm going to ask the CSC students to write some research paper on this. The software can be compared to what? The subtle body or the mind. The subtle body or the mind. And the user is compared to the soul, the Atma, the self. The self. So how a user uses the software to interact with the hardware. So similarly, the soul uses the mind or the subtle body to interact with the gross body. So you can compare the mind to a software. We can learn a lot about mind just by learning how a software behaves. Does the software have bugs? Does the mind have bugs? Yeah, the mind also has bugs. Software has viruses. Yes, the mind also has viruses. So we can learn a lot. From this analogy, we can also learn a lot about our own mind and the body. Does the hardware crash?
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes it crashes, irrecoverably it crashes. So that's equivalent to the body dying. That's equivalent to the body dying. But we will use this example in the coming sessions to talk more about mechanics of transmigration. We can use this example to understand that. So the Bhagavad Gita talks about a hierarchy within. So in the inner world, there is a hierarchy. How in the IT world, there is a hierarchy, right? There is the individual contributor, manager, and then senior manager, director, and so on and so forth. So similarly, the inner world has a hierarchy, right? Inner world has a hierarchy. And what happens, if the hierarchy in the IT world, in a company is not followed, what happens? What is the example of a hierarchy not being followed? It's a very simple example, right? Sometimes the individual contributor can decide, okay, I'm going to work on my own interesting project, right? I don't have to report to, I don't care what my managers say, but I find this project interesting, so I'm going to go ahead and work on that. So let's say, some of the ICs decide to do that, then what will be the fate of that whole group? It will collapse. It will be totally chaos, right? Because the hierarchy is not being followed. Maybe some of these people will be let go of. So similarly, there is also hierarchy in our inner world. So how does Krishna describe this hierarchy? So he says beautiful words from the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. It says Indriyana Pranyahur Indriyabhya Paramanaha Manasastu Parabuddhir Yo Buddhe Paratastu Saha. So he says the working senses are superior to dull matter because the senses are manipulating the dull matter. Right? We are manipulating the dull matter basically to create a TV, to create anything that we want, to basically trying to satisfy our senses. So the working senses are superior to dull matter, and higher than the senses is what? The mind. Because all the inputs from these senses is going into the mind. And higher than the mind is the intelligence, buddhi. And higher than the intelligence is the self or the soul. So here is the hierarchy in a diagrammatic depiction. The bottom is the senses, above the senses is the mind, and above the mind is the buddhi, and above the buddhi is Atma. So this is the hierarchy. Just hold this concept for now. We will use this concept, as a form of exercise in the coming slides. Just hold this concept. So this is the hierarchy of our inner world that Krishna discusses in the Bhagavad Gita.
In the previous slide, you haven't discussed about false ego. False ego.
Right. False ego will come. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. So we talked about this. We talked about good intentions. and then sometimes good intentions translate into action, but many times it doesn't. So what is in between? The mind. So the mind is in between, sitting in between, and it's like an authority. Okay, I mean this. I feel like okay, these good intentions can be translated into action, but today I don't feel like that. So let's reject everything. So the mind behaves as if it is an independent entity. Have you had this experience? Right? Sometimes the mind cooperates with us, but sometimes the mind, I have my own plan. I mean, I know you have a plan, but I want to follow my plan. And that's why there are so many distractions, right? We may set out, okay, I want to finish this, assignment, I want to finish this work, I want to finish this project, and I want to be prepared for the meeting, and so on and so forth. And we may have a lot of plan, and then just we sit before the computer, and there is a pop-up on the computer, notification. Your friend has commented on your post. And that's it, all our goals, and the mind is like, hey, you know what, that is more interesting. Forget about your plan, forget about your assignment, forget about your exam. That is more interesting. And then we, get distracted like that, and then we go on, looking at the post, okay, how many likes I have, then that sets the tone for the day. And then every once in a while we check, okay, and now I have 20 likes. Why is this friend not liking that? Right? I mean, of course, I'm exaggerating maybe, but sometimes people also ping. Can you like my post? Can you share my post? I mean, people do it. But I'm not saying any of you you will do this, but there are people who do this actually, and it also acts in the opposite way actually, where they see their friend getting more likes than their post. And then they're thinking, why this guy is, then they become very negative, and then they become very, as if, our self-worth is dependent on that. So they become very negative on that. So the mind, is a very powerful entity. Very powerful entity. So even Arjuna says, yes, Krishna is very powerful. It's not so easy to control the mind. So Krishna also agrees, yes, it's not easy to control the mind. It's very difficult. It's a very powerful entity. But Krishna says it's possible by suitable practice. By suitable practice and suitable steps. We can, when we apply this, the practice and the knowledge over a period of time consistently, the spiritual practice and knowledge over a period of time, then the control of mind is possible, step by step. So what is the mind? It's $1 million question. So we can think of the mind. There's a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogata. 254. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Siddha. Yes, 255. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Prajahati Ida Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogata Atman Yevatmana Tushta Sita Pragya Taduchyate. So Krishna says, he gives a very short answer for this. He says, all the desires for material desires which arise from mental concoction. So the mind can be defined as a desire or a thought generating factory. The mind can be defined as a desire or a thought generating factory. Like how you have a factory, you have an assembly line, and so many things are getting produced, and in an assembly line everything is getting generated. Similarly, the mind can be considered as a conveyor, like a conveyor belt, where all thoughts and desires are, so many thousands of thoughts and desires are getting generated. So it's a desire and thought generating factory. And we can also extend that to understand that the mind is also storehouse of all thoughts, our previous experiences, our desires, our emotions, and any experiences that we have. And you can also think of the mind like a switch. Like how you have the switch and it can be on or off. So similarly, the mind can be thought of as a switch. The two sides of the switch, of course, it's not on and off. The two sides of the switch is I like this, I don't like this. So that is the two sides of the switch. So the mind, based on its previous experiences and based on the previous actions, has a certain proclivity, has a certain inclination, and it has likes for certain things and it has dislikes for certain things. So it is like a switch which turns on. So when the input, the senses gives the input, the mind actually either turns into a state, yes, I like it, or no, I don't like it. So you can also think of the mind as a switch and a storehouse. So there are many examples that's given, in the Vedas. The Vedas actually compare the mind to, in fact, the video. The mind, the Vedas compare the mind to a drunken monkey. I mean, monkey itself is a little, restless and unsteady. What do you speak about? A drunken monkey. In fact, of course, the Vedas further extend, the minds can be sometimes so uncontrolled that, let's say this drunken monkey is bitten by a scorpion, right? And then suddenly it also sees a ghost. Then what will be the state of the monkey? So sometimes the mind can be so restless. So it's given an example like that. So sometimes it's also compared to a wild horse. Anybody here, you've taken a ride on a horse? Anybody? Because that is actually a trained horse, right? But a wild horse, it will not allow you to sit, and it will not allow anybody to sit on it. It's a wild horse. The mind can also be compared to a wild horse. What will the wild horse do when it's not trained? When you try to sit on it, what it will do? It will throw you off. It will throw you off, and you will come back. So there has to be, the trainer, somebody who actually trains the wild horse. He has to be trained well how to deal with the horse, right? And he has to train the horse properly. So similarly, the mind can also be compared to a wild horse. So if you don't know how to train the wild horse, then we will fall down and we will break our bones. So similarly, that can also happen with the mind. Anyway, those are some examples, and sometimes it's also compared to a very naughty child. It's also compared to a very naughty child.
You
Yes.
wanna play that monkey?
Yes. So just before, and I'll just finish this slide, and then so the another example that's very nicely given. It's so the screen in a theater, right? How on a screen in a theater all the different images and the frames are projected, right? Of course, we don't see the shift of the frames because it's done so fast. But how on the screen of a theater so many frames are projected, every millisecond. So similarly, the mind can be compared to a screen of the theater. So where all these thoughts and desires are projected. So the mind also can be compared to a screen, where all these thoughts or desires are projected. So now we will see a funny video about what is the mind. Okay. This is not a drunken monkey. I'm not sure. Because I don't know what it ate. I'm not sure if the dinner is done truly. So what was some of your observation from that video? What do you think? What do you think just happened with the monkey? And you can relate with the mind. Or connect with the mind. Anything? Can you be a little louder? Desire. Yeah, desire to basically try to enjoy, and then the more the desire, you try to satisfy more and more desire, but you still not satisfied. Good, nice.
Endless.
Huh?
Endless.
Endless. Nice.
Thoughts.
Distracted. Yeah. Thoughts. Distracted. Nice. Very nice. I mean, all these points are nice. Prashant, Ramanamurthy, Denith,
Greedy.
And Janani. Sorry, Janvi. And your name? Drumel.
Yeah.
So all these points are absolutely right. So it can represent thoughts. So many thoughts come into our mind, and then we can be so distracted that we can go from one thought to another, and then we are not focused on any. Right? That's what the monkey was doing. It was taking the so many bread or one, but it was not. It was not focusing on one of them and eat peacefully. Sometimes you experience this, right? Or you've heard this phrase. They're very busy, but not really productive. Sometimes you felt this, right? I feel very busy, but I have not done anything. Why? Because I have 100 windows open, and I'm jumping from one window to another and trying to multitask, trying to get so many things done, but I don't get anything done. That's exactly what the monkey also represents. He has so many thoughts. He has so many, his focus keeps switching from one thought to another, from one bun to another, but he's not able to focus on any one single subject matter. So it also represents our restless nature of the mind. It also represents our unsteady mind, unsteady nature of the mind. By default, the nature of the mind is unsteady. This is the default nature of the mind. Unless we discipline the mind, we train the mind. So because we are not the mind, so that's a big relief. I am not this mind or the monkey mind. So I'm different than the mind. So I don't have to act on every suggestion of the mind. I don't have to act on every recommendation of the mind. Like you have an AI system, right? Of course, all these algorithms are at play right now, right? If you watch one video, and then what does the YouTube do? Recommendation. All the videos, and Partha was telling me that he gets all cooking videos. As these are students, right? They're just learning to cook, and then they're trying to learn cooking. So he watched probably a few videos. Now YouTube is suggesting only cooking videos. So similarly, mind is also like that. It's a highly. I mean, of course, we think that we are creating AI and everything, but this is the original AI system. This is the original recommendation system that Krishna has created, and nobody can beat that. So this is the original system. It's like an AI system which is trained in a certain way, and when it's trained in a certain way, it is going to give recommendation based on what you have fed it, how you have trained it is going to give you recommendation. Like if you have spent all your life eating rasagulla or eating in the other class, I think we give the example of Kaju Katli. So if you're trained, if you have acted in that way throughout your life, then naturally your mind will be attracted to Kaju Katli. So there may be some other sweet also, but from a distant you may see it as Kaju Katli. So that's how the mind acts. Yes, Anirudh.
So in this analogy of the theater and the projections, so the projections are the thoughts, right?
Yes.
So what is the projector?
Yes. So the projector. That's a very good point. So the projections and the screen is the mind, but the projector is actually it can come from the subconscious mind. It can come from deep within. You can say there can be multiple things. The projector can be the inputs that we receive from the external world. That can be one possibility. It can also be our previous samskars. Or samskars is a Sanskrit term which means impressions. So whatever we do in our life, right, there is going to be a reaction for that, right? But there is also going to be a reaction on our mind. There is also going to be a subtle reaction. Like for example, if I'm prone to getting angry, right? If I'm short-tempered, if I'm prone to getting angry, and I would go and slap someone, right? Of course, now that person is going to react. He's not going to keep quiet. So that is a reaction at the physical level. But now there is also another reaction which happens at the subtle level. So what the reaction at the subtle level is, it creates an impression or what is called as samskars in our mind. Now if I keep doing this over a period of time, that becomes a habit. It becomes a rock solid impression in my mind that this is how I'm going to behave. If somebody provokes me, I'm going to become violent. So that impression gets registered in the mind, and the projector can also be those impressions. So impressions can have multiple sources, can be external, it can also be internal. So samskars can also be the source of these.
Is there a way to
Yes.
control?
So is there a way to rewire? Is there a way to, I'll just come in a minute. Is there a way to rewire it? Yes, absolutely. There is a way to rewire it, and that's where the spiritual knowledge and the spiritual practice comes into play. So the spiritual practice, especially the mantra meditation process, is a very powerful process which actually cleanses the mind of all these unwanted samskars. Samskars in Sanskrit is, of course, it's pronounced as samskars, but you can also say it as in English as some scars. Scars, like how because of based on our previous action, there are scars, some scars that is actually created in the mind. But actually, we can reprogram or rewire the mind through the practice of meditation, and especially mantra meditation, which is like a very, very powerful. You can compare the mantra meditation process to a cleansing agent. Like let's say if you get a mango sap on your white cloth, it forms a very strong stain. It forms a very strong stain, right? And the normal detergent may not be able to cleanse the stain from the white cloth. You can put as much normal detergent, but it will not go. The stain will still be there. So that is equivalent to some scars. But then what do you put? You put a strong solvent, a strong agent, like what? Bleach. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I'm a little, I need to learn that knowledge. So you put a little bleach, and then it acts as a strong solvent to dissolve that stain. And then now the cloth becomes very clean. So similarly, the mantra meditation is a strong solvent actually. We need strong solvent, not just, anything will work. So the mantra meditation process, can be compared to a strong bleach or solvent which removes these samskars from the mind. It purifies the mind, and then it elevates the mind to the mode of goodness. In fact, that's what mantra means. If you know the word Sanskrit word mantra, of course we know. What is mantra? Yeah, mantra. Slok, chant. Yeah, it's spiritual sound vibrations. So mantra means spiritual sound vibrations that's coming from the ancient Vedic system, right? It's coming from the ancient Vedas. So this spiritual sound vibration has a different effect on us. In fact, the word mantra can be split into two terms. It's man and tra. So what does man mean? The mind. And tra means to deliver, to uplift, to cleanse, to purify, to uplift, basically. So mantras are strong spiritual sound vibrations which cleanses our mind and uplifts our mind. So which purifies our mind. So these samskars can be cleansed using the spiritual practice. And of course, for that we need to have spiritual knowledge. Yes. Thank you.
So would you say that desires are good and not good?
Yes, very, very good
And the
question.
reason why, because of all the talk that's happening right now, I feel the desire and the want for me to come here
Mhm.
is a good desire,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
For somebody to go to a strip club, it's not a good one, right?
Yes. Yes.
And when we are talking about rewiring,
Mhm.
we are in the same, we are trying to wire ourselves to do the good.
Yes. We are trying to create the good samskars. But we are trying to train the mind in such a way it behaves like a friend. It's conducive. And so the recommendation system is being changed right now. We are training the mind. We can train the mind so that it becomes our friend, it becomes an aid, so that we act in such a way that's conducive for our own growth. It's conducive for, it aids us rather than it disrupting. So we can surely train the mind like that.
So desires are good and
So
bad.
yes, so yeah, that's a very good question. That's a very good point. So generally, we think of spirituality as totally become desireless, but that's a very misconception. Because we cannot totally become desireless,
Yes.
but we can upgrade our desires. So there are two kinds of desires the Bhagavad Gita talks about. One is material desires, other one is spiritual desires. So what the Bhagavad Gita advises us is we upgrade the desires from material, from being self-centered and being self-sabotaging, from being destructive to actually uplifting. So we choose those. So we basically upgrade our desires, and this spiritual process of knowledge and meditation or knowledge and practice will help us to refine our desires. Will help us to upgrade our desires. How many of you want to upgrade your desires? Okay. Everyone. Nice.
Because even while chanting, after people will chant and the desire is not there. They
Sorry,
just
can you
listen.
come again?
I said even while chanting or when people are praying, half the mind is here, half is not there.
Sure.
Half the people chant, half don't chant.
Right. I mean, sure. I mean, it's
So
a
the
journey.
desire again is there,
Right. Sure. That's fine. That is fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. But it's a gradual process. It's a gradual process. If you want take a bottle of black ink and you want to convert it into white color, right? Can you do it instantly? No, we will not be able to do it instantly. Let's say I take a bottle of black ink and I start pouring milk into it. Now the bottle of black ink will go through many shades, right? It will start from black to light black to dark gray to light gray, and finally after some time it will become white milk. So that's how our cleansing process also happens. Our refinement of desires also goes through different stages. It's not going to be quick or instant, but as we keep at the process, the process of the spiritual process in terms of the practice and the knowledge, because knowledge we're learning from the Bhagavad Gita, there is also a spiritual practice, the meditation practice. As we keep at it, then the refinement will happen gradually. Thank you. Yes.
I think he
Oh, sorry, Prashant. I mean, you want to give the chance to your wife?
No, you can ask.
So, well, you said one example wherein the person has gone and hit another person, right?
Right.
His mind is in control.
Mhm.
And you have set in a hierarchy, right? Wherein sense organs and then mind
Mind.
and intelligence.
Right.
Then your soul will come.
Yes.
So, as per that, can we say that mind captures your soul?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So that's where, in fact, that leads us into the next section of the class, which is how does this all, we heard all these elements inside of us, now how do they interplay? How do they work, together? So we already discussed about the mind, we discussed about there is buddhi or intelligence, and that's very beautifully also explained in this example of a chariot. And we'll come to that in a minute.
No, but
So-
I mean, in that case, your hierarchy is breached, right?
Yes, it is breached. That's correct. It is breached, and for many people, it's breached many times. that's the point. That's for many of us, it is breached many times. That's true, because the mind just overrides everything. The mind many times it overrides the intelligence, and that's why there is this tug of war inside, and that's why sometimes we go back and forth. Should I do this or should I not do this? Should I do this or let me illustrate that with an example. Let's take the example. Anybody wants to say what's your favorite dessert? Cheesecake. And your name again?
Aryan.
Aryan's, his he likes cheesecake, and of course Aryan is a young boy, so I don't want to take his example. Let me just give a common example. So, somebody, let's say somebody likes cheesecake, and then they have lived their whole life just, dumping cheesecake, just eating cheesecake, and they really love it, and they are conditioned to really like it a lot. Now they have come to program, at Shyam Prabhu's home, and then they are sitting in the class there, and then they see cheesecake actually going from the door to the kitchen. They see, and then they immediately, they get distracted. Okay, class, it'll go on. Prabhu will keep speaking. Let me go and see, what is the flavor of this, what is the base of the cheesecake, and so on and so forth. Let me go and check it out. And so these are the natural reaction. So now, what is the state of the mind towards the cheesecake? What is the switch? I love it. It's not just like it. I just love it, and I would do anything to get this piece of cheesecake. So the mind is now, really agitated. It's like really wanting to taste this cheesecake with the tongue. So the tongue and mind works together now. They are partner in crime, right? They are now working together. Yes, let's somehow devour this cheesecake, and we'll experience. And the mind, also gives this notion that there is an ocean of happiness in this cheesecake. Like, we discussed this in the last week. The Coke has this advertisement, right? There's a bottle of Coke which is open, and then open the bottle to happiness, right? So similarly, the mind gives this notion, this is going to make my life, that's it. I'm going to enjoy this. My whole life is going to be so bliss. It's going to be blissed out. So the mind gives the notion, and then the soul, so this is the mind's, state. Now, this is where the buddhi comes in. And then the buddhi is, it's very, if the buddhi is strong, it comes in strong. If it's very weak, then it comes in very weak. The buddhi comes in and then it says to the mind, my dear mind, remember the resolution we took just 1 week ago? We decided to cut out all the sweets. And do you remember the report from the doctor? We had a health checkup, 1 month ago, and it was all, all red flags everywhere. So the doctor has told us to cut on all the sweets. Do you remember that? So the mind is now coming in. So the mind is where the evaluation happens. The mind is where the discernment happens. Whether it's good for me or it's bad for me. The intelligence is where the discernment happens. The mind, I like it, I don't like it. That's the mind. But buddhi is where it comes and says, okay, is this good for me? Is this good for me in the long run? Should I give in to this short-term pleasure? What are the effects of this short-term pleasure? Is it worth it? So these are the this is the function of the intelligence or buddhi. But many times we know that who overrides who? Does the mind win or the intelligence win? The mind. Because the mind is very powerful. Because we have made it so powerful. We have given so much autonomy to the mind, and we have made it so powerful that the mind just overrides or vetoes everything. Like how the President of the United States, the Congress can say, the Senate can say, but I can veto. So similarly, the mind also vetoes. Okay, thanks for the lecture. We look at it another day. So the mind many times vetoes, and that's a problem. It's a big problem, because as Prashant Prabhu very nicely said, the hierarchy is breached. And when hierarchy is breached, we don't necessarily do what is good for us, especially in the long run. We don't necessarily, we are attracted by something temporary, that is short term, and what we lose what is beneficial in the long term. So, many times the mind actually overrides the intelligence, and that's why people do many stupid things. People, and especially in this world, we can see, people can get addicted, can really get extreme, and people do really stupid things. Just following the dictation of the uncontrolled mind and senses can really lead you into a ditch, unless we discipline and control the mind using the buddhi. And of course, we all have this understanding, but we may not be able to point it exactly. I mean, you have this awareness, right? Yes, I have to work now, or I have to study now. We have this awareness, and that I have to discipline my mind now. I cannot just give in to the whims of the mind all the time. Otherwise, it will destroy my life. Actually. So that's where this chariot example comes. The chariot example, it talks about the hierarchy, but in the analogy of a chariot. So what do the horses represent? The senses, right? The five knowledge acquiring senses. The eyes, nose, ears, tongue, and touch, sense of touch. So these are the five knowledge acquiring senses. And what do you think the rain represents? Control, but here it represents the mind. So the mind is attached to all the senses. All the inputs from the senses go to the mind. And who do you think the driver represents? Intelligence. So intelligence is holding the reins or the ropes. Right, and who do you think the passenger is? Atma, the soul. The passenger is the Atma, the soul. You can see the intelligence and the soul looks a little bewildered. Right? So, by default in this world, when we don't have this knowledge, when we don't have a spiritual practice, by default the world, the world operates in a way where the hierarchy is breached. The world operates in a way, so the horses pull us in different directions. The senses pulls us in different directions, and the mind also goes along with the senses, and everybody just follows that path. So this is the default mode of, yes, I'll come to you. This is the default mode of operation that we all experience in this world. But then so what is the solution? How can we establish the hierarchy? Can somebody say, how can we establish this hierarchy inside of us? Give me some suggestions. Practice, consistency. But with respect to this diagram, how can controlling the reins? So basically the intelligence controlling the reins, right? What can we give the intelligence? Yes.
Developing spiritual.
Yeah, we can actually strengthen the intelligence, right? We strengthen the intelligence generally using material knowledge, so that we can ace the interview, we can ace the exam. So that is material knowledge, and we can strengthen the intelligence on solving a material problem. That's what we are used to. But we can also strengthen the intelligence based on spiritual knowledge. Now, when you give spiritual knowledge to the intelligence, now the intelligence is actually going to grow in its power. That's why it's recommended that we read the Bhagavad Gita. At least we spend few minutes every day reading at least one verse of the Bhagavad Gita, because it strengthens our intelligence. This knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, strengthens our intelligence. So that's why it's recommended that we keep in touch with our scriptures, because it strengthens our intelligence. Yes. Nice point. Yes. And what else we can do? We can strengthen one more entity here. What is the other entity? We can strengthen who said that? Yeah. Janavi said we can strengthen the Atma. How can we strengthen the Atma? We discussed this last week. Meditation. My dear friend Arun here has the answer, that it can be strengthened by meditation. It can be strengthened by the power of chanting the holy names of the Lord. Like how this bulb can show its strength. Can we do a demo? Can you remove the
Light.
light? Can you remove the plug? Yeah. So now the light is not able to show its strength, right? So how can this light show its strength again?
Connecting to switch.
Connect to the power.
By connecting to the power source, right? By again plugging it in, by connecting to the power source. So similarly, the soul can also be strengthened again by connecting to its power source, and that power source is the Supreme. So that we can do by the process of meditation, and especially by mantra meditation, we can strengthen ourselves, the self, the soul, by connecting it to its power source or to its source, which is, of course, you can call it as Supreme God and so on and so forth, which we'll talk about, in the coming sessions. We can strengthen that by connecting, using the process of meditation, connecting to the Supreme using the process of meditation and chant. So I will pause there for a few minutes to take some reflections, comments, or questions. Yes, Divya Mataji.
So we were talking about good desire, bad desire, and also sanskar. So like sanskar we get from our childhood also.
Right.
So suppose our parents.
Not only your childhood, but it also comes from previous lives.
Previous lives.
Right.
Yeah, understood. So we have this sense of good and bad. Suppose
Right.
I know tomorrow is my exam.
Mm.
So reading or studying, that is good for me. I learned it from my parents too. And I know my good bad part knows that this is good, this is something I should do. So a student is, suppose he is very determined, I will study for 4 hours today. But then another friend is going to movie,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
And he says, are you coming with me?
Yes.
So with this all sanskar and sense of
So the
good,
other friend can be on the mind also. It doesn't have to be externally a friend.
yeah,
It
even
be the
it
mind
can
also.
come on the TV, like
Right,
when
right,
movie
right.
is coming. So we forget every sanskar and everything, and we go towards that. Okay,
Right.
I'll watch the movie and then I can study later,
Right.
and that never happens, right?
Right.
So how and why it happens, and like how can we be very determined?
Yeah. So how can we be very determined? That's exactly the point we were discussing now. The way we can be determined in our pursuance of our goals and is to basically, we have to establish the hierarchy inside. We have to empower our intelligence and we have to empower our soul. So that's why when we establish that hierarchy, and when, as Prashant Prabhu mentioned, many times the hierarchies are breached. So when we establish that hierarchy as an irrevocable fact, then we'll be able to follow our plan with determination. So that is why spiritual knowledge and spiritual practice are not optional, in life. If you want to really, even materially successful, you need to have a high amount of discipline. And where is that going to come from? I mean, many successful people have some sort of a ritual. They have some sort of meditation. They have some sort of a morning routine that they actually are sticking to, so that they can function in a high pressure and high pressure environment. So you need to have something that actually empowers the intelligence and that empowers the soul, and that's the spiritual knowledge and practice, and that's where the determination comes from. And also determination also comes from association. So if you have like-minded people, and if you associate with like-minded people, like for example, let's say both of you are in the same department and you're taking the same course. Now you decide, okay, we will let's study together. Let's help each other. Let's do the assignments together and so on and so forth. Now what happens? Now your determination, both of your determination has increased, right? Now one person may be feeling low or lethargic, or may feel like I don't want to do anything today, but the other person may come, hey, chalo, let's we have an exam coming, let's go and read. So now the other person's determination comes up. So determination also is strengthened in association. So and this is also very important point, because what is the single most important thing to be successful in any journey? Like for example, what do you think is the single most important thing? We are all going on a spiritual journey now. What do you think is single most important to be successful in this spiritual journey? Yes.
Knowing the destination.
Discipline,
Knowing
consistency, determination, purpose. What did you?
Knowing your destination.
Knowing your destination. All those answers are correct. But the key thing is, what keeps the motivation alive? What keeps the determination alive? Is association. What keeps this the association is the fuel to that fire. Association is the fuel to that fire. So if you're really serious about a spiritual pursuit, the single most important thing, you can forget everything that I said so far, but you can remember this one thing. If somebody goes and asks you outside, hey, what the guy was talking about, he was talking for a long time, you can say this. The single most important thing, if you want to be successful in spiritual life, it is satsang, it is association. So we need to have this association at regular intervals. We need to have this association consistently. We need to make it a practice. And when we do it as a practice, then we become successful. So I really applaud all of you, because you're coming here every week. And that shows that you're serious about this journey. So thank you for that. Yes.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Like within a family, if one person thinks differently than the other, how do you like resolve it? Who is right, who is wrong?
Yeah, I mean, again, it really depends on the situation. There's no cookie cutter answer. You have to really understand things from different perspective. From what do you have as a value system in your family, and where exactly is the conflict and why the conflict. So there has to be a lot of, there has to be some research into that. And based on that, then we can see, okay, we can come to a conclusion based on the different details. Okay, like for example, there is a conflict between, husband and wife. Who's going to do the dishwashing? Who's going to wash the dishes today? Dishwasher. Yeah, but still there will be fight. Who's going to put it in the dishwasher? So husband.
No, I meant to ask, let's say my son wants to play video games. And
Right.
I know that playing video games is not right. for
Right,
him, right? But then I understand it. But how do you make him understand?
Yeah, they need to have a discussion. We need to have a discussion. We need to understand. We need to also explain, where you are coming from. Of course, we can take this out. We can talk more about this. But where you are coming from. Why do you think it's overindulgence in such things can be harmful, and so on and so forth. So you need to have an open discussion about it and see where the other person is also coming from, and then we can work out some things. We can work out a way that's a win-win. Ultimately, that's what we want. Win-win, and also it's also gradually improve. It's gradual improvement. Generally, what we expect is we expect instant. Yeah, we expect somebody to jump from they are in step 1. Generally, I'm saying, I'm not talking about you. Generally, we want either ourselves or the other person to go from step 1 to step 100 directly. Right? But that's unrealistic expectations. How can you jump from step 1 to step 100? So improvements are also gradual. So what we can expect for a person at step 1 is to come to step 2. So we have to be also mindful of that. And when we are, when we really spend time understanding each other, then we can work out a mutually working solution. Is that okay? Okay.
So, in our hierarchy chart, we also show the false ego within soul and intelligence.
Right.
But we have not talked anything about that.
Yeah. So basically, the false ego, you can say the false ego, the mind. So the false ego resides in the mind. So the mind can be influenced by false ego, and it can actually make choices according to inspired by the ego.
It was the verb intelligence, right?
Right, it is about intelligence, but it's, I mean, Krishna doesn't really say where the false ego is, but these are all just analogies for you to help understand and diagrammatically. But the reason it's above is because it's very subtle. False ego is even subtle than the mind, but generally the mind is conditioned. It can be conditioned by ego. The mind acts as an agent for the false ego.
Even if you talk about mind and intelligence both remain together. I mean,
Yes, they both remain together.
Yeah.
That's correct, but they have different functions. Yes.
Since some of them are new,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they probably have a lot more questions, can we give also maybe
Yeah, sure. If any of you have any questions or comments.
reflections?
And so we also would like to hear any takeaways. So far, whatever we have covered in the session, any takeaways for you, please, share it, because sharing is caring. And as you share, you also, you'll be able to understand, the concepts better. So anything you would like to share, what you heard, any takeaways so far, any comments? I know we had a lot of questions. Anything so far, any takeaways?
I have a comment.
Yes.
So it's a slight conflict in my mind. I had a comment. So whatever you just told is all I agree. Of course, this is.
Thank you.
So.
I mean, objectives are also welcome.
But you need to have certain amount of intelligence. I mean, to me, it seems to be a chicken and egg problem, where you need certain amount of intelligence to strengthen intelligence. You need certain amount of intelligence to strengthen your soul.
Right.
So that awareness and consciousness has to be there. So
Right.
I was not here 10 years ago, right?
Right.
So how can
Yeah, see, that's why the the ancient tradition was so beautifully set up. So this was part of the culture in the ancient India. So the spiritual knowledge would be given right in the beginning of one's life. And all these things, this knowledge, we are listening after 20, 30, 40, 50 years, would be given right in the childhood. And this was the system of the Vedic civilization. This was the system of the ancient India. It's part of the system. And still, there is remnants of the part of the system. But what happened was, all those things got completely destroyed. The whole system was destroyed and replaced with so-called modern education. But the whole modern education, all it does is it just teaches how to earn a living, right? But it doesn't teach us how to live a life. It doesn't teach us it teaches us how to solve problems on papers, but it doesn't teach us how to solve problems in life. So that's why, it's very important. This knowledge was part of our culture, and we need to revive this knowledge and pass it on. Not just learn it, perfect this knowledge, practice this knowledge. We also need to share this knowledge with others. We need to pass it on to the next generation. That's how this knowledge can be kept alive. And it's very important, very important for us to do it. To take this knowledge, benefit ourselves, and also to share it with others, and also to share it with our next generation. So that's what we can do. Unfortunately, because everything is completely collapsed, and it was so the whole system was collapsed. So this knowledge is lost now. So we are trying to access this knowledge again for our own benefit, because how do we handle life? That's a different. It's a different. It requires a different mastery, right? How do you handle life? It requires a different mastery, and that's why people can be very smart, have a high level of IQ. They can be in IIT, but then they come in. There are many instances like this. Where they come the second place in the exam and they cannot handle it. They commit suicide. Very unfortunate. They can be very high in IQ, they can solve a lot of problems on paper, but they cannot handle life. When life throws things at them, they cannot handle life. So that's why this knowledge is very, very essential. So very essential. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
You said that mantra meditation is helpful
Hmm.
and it will help improve, like strengthen the intelligence and the soul,
Right.
etc.
Right.
So, are you saying that we should just keep on chanting without knowing the essence
No, it's a
of what
very,
it
very beautiful point. There is also a mood in which we pray. In fact, we pray with focus. Basically there are 3 P's by which we do the mantra meditation process, which we'll do this exercise next week as a practice. We'll do this exercise next week. So there is 3 P's. One is posture, how you sit. You sit, erect, and then anytime you try to do something important, you just don't laze around like that, right? You strict erect and you sit in whatever comfortable position, but you sit erect. And then the second one is pronunciation. Pronounce it properly, the mantra, and we try to hear the mantra. The focus is on hearing the mantra. So that's the focus. So there is a quantity and there is also a quality aspect. So we pronounce and we hear the mantra because it's spiritual sound vibrations. When it enters, we really hear the mantra. When you're attentive to the mantra brings about transformation within us. And the third one is prayer. If we do it in a prayerful mood, then the mantra uplifts us. It's like Krishna giving a hand, then uplifting us. We saw that picture in the first, where Krishna was extending, Lord Vishnu was extending his hand to the person, hanging from a tree. But then the person was totally oblivious to that. But then the mantra is, we turn our attention towards the Supreme, asking for his help. So the mantra is a short form for SOS. What is SOS? Save our soul. Yeah, when a ship is sinking in the midst of an ocean, then it sends a signal, SOS, SOS, SOS. Then immediately rescue operations happen. So similarly, the mantra is actually an SOS for the soul to the Supreme to come and save us. So when we do it in a prayerful mood, out of call for help, but we'll go deeper into this understanding, because there's a lot of materials to be covered. In fact, after this 8 sessions, we will have a separate session on mantra meditation and chanting. What it means, what it should be the mood, and we'll go very deep into that. But these are the 3 at an introductory level. And if you spend even 10 minutes chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, reading just few verses of Bhagavad Gita, just try it for 30 days. Take it as a 30-day challenge, or Shyam Prabhu will return the money.
I have to collect the money.
Or money back guarantee. But this system has been passed on from so many thousands of years. So many people have tried and tested and become so successful actually. And Krishna himself says, by following this path, so many great yogis and sages have attained the perfection. So you cannot fail. It's a tried and tested path. Yes.
It can be any mantra or only...
Yes, we'll also talk about that. There are many mantras the Vedas actually talk about. For example, the Om is a very popular mantra. Even Westerners chant the mantra Om. It's a one-syllable mantra. And nowadays, so many mantras are popular. The yoga studios, they chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. They chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. They chant so many mantras. But of all the mantras, especially in this Kali Yuga, there is a conversation between Lord Brahma and Narada. So this is in Upanishad called Kali Santarana Upanishad. So here Narada is asking this question to Brahma: what is the easiest means to negate the effects of Kali Yuga? What is the easiest means to negate the effects of Kali Yuga? The Kali Yuga which we are living in, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Because people are not really, they say one thing, they do another thing. So that's hypocrisy. And just at the mention of, just some argument, they began to quarrel. So there's the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. So Lord Brahma responds. He says the whole mantra: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Iti Sodashakam Nanam Kali Kalma Shanashana. So this 16-word, 32-syllable mantra will negate the effects of Kali Yuga. And then Lord Brahma continues. He says, there is no other means which is as sublime, as potent as this mantra, and there's no other means you can find in any of the Vedas more sublime than this. So this mantra is recommended, especially to be chanted in Kali Yuga by by our boss, Lord Brahma. And there are other verses also. Bhagavatam talks about Kalayar dosha nide rajan asti hi eko mahan gunan kirtanat eva krishnasya mukta sangha param bhajan. Prabhu, you want to explain that verse?
Can you repeat the beginning?
Kalayar dosha nide rajan.
So this Kali Yuga has lot of, it's an nidhi.
Ocean of falls.
Ocean of falls. But there is one great quality.
You can be loud so the people there can also hear.
There is one good quality of Kali Yuga. So in other ages, what is attainable by thousands and thousands years of practice and mind control can very easily be attained, because the conditions are very difficult. The setup was also said, okay, because the conditions are very difficult, even if you are able to make little spiritual this one. So the best quality of Kali Yuga is just by chanting the holy
Krishna's holy names. Kirtanat eva krishnasya. One can attain all perfection. Kirtanat eva krishnasya mukta sangha param bhajan. One can attain all perfection. So the pass mark is only 10. Because it's Kali Yuga, it's very difficult age to practice. The chronic disease of modern man is no time. Right? No time, I don't have time. There is a chronic disease. And then you don't have time for spiritual life, you'll be stressed. So be full of stress and anxiety. If you don't devote our time to spirituality, generally the mantra is no time. It's not that you don't have time. If it's important, we have to make time. Right? It's not that there is no time. If it's important, we have to make time. I was driving to Hayward to pick up some of these students. Let's say, my gasoline was almost getting over. And I cannot say, I have no time, so I will keep driving. I will not pick them, I will not come to the class. So it's important for me to stop and put gasoline in the van so that I can pick them and also come to the class and also have a discussion in the class. So if it's important, we have to make time. So this is one sutra you can take for today. If it's important, you have to make time. So it's very important. And if you make time for spirituality, I'll tell you, you will get much more time to deal with all your other affairs. Because if you take time to sharpen the pencil, right, if you're writing an exam and the pencil has become blunt, and then you're writing and suddenly you're just scribbling all over the place. But if you take time to sharpen the pencil, is it a waste of time? No, that's not a waste of time. It's sharpening the pencil. So the spiritual, and then you can write again smoothly and maybe even more effectively, and you can finish the paper faster. So similarly, spiritual practice and knowledge is like taking the time out to sharpen ourselves, to sharpen our mind, to purify our mind, to sharpen our intelligence, and to empower our soul. So spiritual practice, it does three things. What does the spiritual knowledge and practice does? It purifies the mind. It sharpens the intelligence. And it strengthens the soul. So we have to make time for our spiritual knowledge and spiritual practice, because with these effects, what happens is, when it sharpens our intelligence, purifies the mind, whatever sometimes they give a work for 1 hour and you drag it, it'll probably take, instead of 1 hour, it'll probably take 1 day. But then when these faculties are purified, strengthened, sharpened, then you can finish the same amount of work in 10 minutes. So that's how. Of course, I'm not saying, don't expect overnight. Don't expect these results overnight, but it will happen if we invest in this spiritual culture on a consistent basis. You will notice all these transformations for yourself. You can experience all these transformations for yourself. I'm looking at Shambhu. I know people are raising their hands.
Maybe
So
we'll
we-
take one comment.
Yeah, any takeaways? Yes.
No, I have a question.
Yes.
No, it was just the takeaway. I don't have the question.
Okay.
What is intuition?
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Where does it come from?
Yeah.
Mind or intelligence or?
So there is another entity which we have not discussed so far. So there is an entity called as Super Soul or Paramatma. So Krishna will discuss in the future sessions. So there is a topic of Ishvara, or who is the supreme controller. And when we talk about the topic, Krishna says, Upadrashta Anumantacha, Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara, Paramatmeti Chapiyukto, Dehismin Purusha Para. So talks about Paramatma actually. So the source of intuition is Paramatma. That's why you can see many, if you really look at the story of many of the scientists and many of the creative artists, in many of their stories you will see that they are actually looking for a solution. And it's not that, they just logically arrive at a solution. They are at a certain state, but then there is a bolt of inspiration which doesn't logically follow these steps, but it arrives at a conclusion which gives them the solution. So that is what intuition means, and that is coming from a higher source. And that's Paramatma. But we'll discuss more about that.
Srihan has a question.
We'll take it offline.
Yeah, maybe maybe 5 minutes, 5 more minutes. Any other comments? You had a comment?
Yeah. So I was just thinking, people were discussing the hierarchy. Like I was just thinking why ego is kept above intelligence. And this is my understanding. I was just thinking the example of Ravana. So he was so intelligent and he was spiritually enriched as well. But
He was religious.
Yeah, he was
I wouldn't say
very-
spiritual.
Yeah, he is religious.
He was ritual.
And he was intelligent. No one can deny that he was not intelligent. So in intelligence level he was up. But when his aham or ego has overtaken in Ramayana, so that's why I think self-ego is kept above intelligence.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, ego is the function of the ego is to the ego entity helps us to identify false ego. Ahankar means false ego. So we have a real ego. As we were talking about desires, there is good desires and bad desires. So we have a real ego. Real ego means we are situating ourselves on our real identity. So false ego means it's a false identity. So false ego is an element which helps us to take on a false identity. And in Ravana's case, he took on a false identity that I am the supreme, I am the controller, I am the supreme controller here, but he was not. I am the supreme enjoyer here. So these are the false identities that the false ego presents to us or helps us to take on.
Yeah, and he took his intelligence.
Right, his intelligence was basically functioning for his false ego. So it was impure intelligence. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So will we be benefited by chanting the mantra even without knowing its meaning?
Yes.
Because there are so many mantras.
Well, I mean, we will discuss about the meaning of the mantra, in the coming sessions. But you will still be benefited. Yes. Like if you take the medicine, you don't necessarily have to know the ingredients of the medicine or what the medicine constitutes, but still the medicine will act. So the mantra, the process of meditation or mantra meditation is like taking a medicine. And what is the disease it's trying to cure? It's trying to cure the disease of the material conception of life. So we have this material conception of life. We think that we belong to this material world. We think that we are matter. We think that we are the body. So we have this disease, this materially conditioned disease. So the mantra is a medicine which actually cures us of the disease and helps us to understand that we are not we are not matter, but we are spirit. That's the first step. But
So
as we
pronouncing it properly is more important than knowing its meaning and saying it.
Well, I would say we just try to pronounce it properly. Right from the beginning. So, because then both are important, I would say. So both are important. Pronouncing I mean, it's a simple mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna
Not this
Krishna.
mantra, but there are like so many.
Yeah, so many mantras are there, but Hare Krishna Mahamantra, it has the potencies of all the other mantras combined in it. So that's what Lord Brahma's discussion with Narada Muni is, that it has the potency of all the other mantras combined in it. One final. Yes. Where is Kishore? Yes.
Extension, like in case of Ravana.
Mm.
So he has like religious, spiritual,
He's not spiritual, he's just ritualistic person.
meditation and everything.
No, I don't know. Did you do meditation? But he did a lot of puja and everything. But you have to understand why he did all those things.
But still, is at the end, like mind has overridden.
Yes, mind has overridden. Even though he was following all those things, so that's why Krishna says, even if you follow the Vedas, but you do it with the wrong motive, you're not going anywhere. If you do so many pujas and everything, but you're still materialistic, and you're doing all those things to get materialistic benefits, you're not going anywhere out of the material world. And Krishna says that again and again. In fact, in the 7th chapter, he says, those who follow the 3 Vedas just for material benefit, they are not going to get anything spiritual. So spirituality is another subject. Spirituality is another subject matter.
The two parts, karma kanda and jnana kanda.
Right.
But
Right.
like what the Buddha's program you're talking about is karma kanda.
Right.
After you do karma, you get the result.
Yes.
But it may not have spiritual.
Exactly. That's my point. Unless you come in contact with a self-realized soul, and then your interest in spirituality can awaken from that point on. But if you're materially motivated, doesn't matter. We're going to stick here. If we are not refining our desires, still have only materialistic desires, we're going to come back again and again.
But he was like biggest Shiva devotee.
Right. But he worshipped Lord Shiva, but he also tried to kidnap Parvati. So what can I do? So we have to understand, he worshipped Lord Shiva, yes, but he was not truly a devotee of Lord Shiva. He just wanted power. He wanted power over, dominion over the planets, dominion over Swarga and so on and so forth.
So we can say like there was greed behind his.
Yes, he was worshipping Lord Shiva, but he was not a devotee of Lord Shiva. His desires were not pure. It was motivated. It was materialistic. Okay.
Alright, I think it felt like rapid fire, lot of questions coming in and quickly answering. So let's thank Sundar Prabhu by giving a round of applause.
So thank you for your kind attention and your wonderful questions and very active participation. Thank you. So claps for them.
It looks like we won the dinner tonight. So we do want to take this opportunity because all of you have come here. It enables us to have these programs continuing. So I also want to thank all the students here. Welcome to US, and I'm sure you'll find many more friends here. We hope to see you back here every week. So we have few volunteers who helped us prepare dinner. Couple of volunteers. My wife is taking care of the younger children, and Ramilagara is taking care of the older kids. So we could all sit here and peacefully understand mind. One of the things that mind was compared to, Prabhu was mentioning about, mind is like a child. So that, at least in my personal experience, I was able to connect with it very easily. You take the child and the child sees a balloon or an ice cream. So, I want the ice cream. And the mother or the father, sometimes they're strong and they're, no, it's not good for you, and they're able to take it. But most often, we are also puppets in the hands of the children. So you want ice cream? Okay, all right. Let me see if I have money or cash. So our intelligence is like that. If it's strong, it is able to take the childlike mind in the right direction. But if it is not, then we also. So we hope that these sessions will be beneficial for you. So one thing we were discussing yesterday is maybe over the next few days, in your own life, I'm sure you have had these conversations inside. Hey, we decided not to do this. And the mind is saying, no, maybe just this time. I'm not saying permanently come back. Just one more time, one more Kaju Katli, one more Rasagula. So
One more video.
one more YouTube, one more video, one more Facebook. Just distraction for 5 minutes. Anyway, we're not solving this problem now. We're not. So let's take a quick break and we'll come back. So these sessions are supposed to be transformative journey.
No, that quick break will become quick break. It will become a long break actually.
So one thing we request all of you to do as an exercise is over the next few days in your own life you can observe how this interaction is, the tug of war between the mind and the intellect and what's happening inside. And I was discussing yesterday with one of the attendants. We had to practice ABCs for a very, very long time for us to be able to eventually write ABCs or multiplication. I was playing with my son, and so we were playing 7 times 4, 28, 8 times 6, 48, like that. And my son was asking, how are you able to figure out so quickly? So, I mean, we practiced it for many, many times before we were able to get there. So the mind and intelligence relationship is also like that. And we will talk more in the next session on how we can purify and control the mind more.
Yeah,
but it begins.
It's only part 1, part 2 is next week. Part 2 is next week.
So I think, Prabhu, he was able to see the future. He said he took so many sessions and he said session 3 is usually Bahubali part 1 and Bahubali part 2. So we'll have the follow-up session on the mind next week. So during this 1 week, if you can all go back and try to figure out and start practicing what we have learned this week, I think it will be very beneficial. And when you come back next week, I think you can all share what tug of war was going on in your minds, and we will see which one more often or the other. So yeah, so maybe because we have such poor memories, maybe we can, whenever possible, you can actually make a note. So when next week when we come back, we'll take few points from everyone. And I'm sure it will be beneficial, and I'm very, very sure that it is very common. Even though we think this is very unique to me, you will see that many of us are also struggling with our minds. So the final announcement is, I want to thank the cooks for few people helped us today. Madhavi ji, she made dal. Dheeraj and Mukta made papads for us. Gayatri ji, she made, I don't know where is. Oh, there, okay. She made snacks for kids. Vanishri, she is very eager to serve. She kept on asking for more to make, but we only gave her one item to make. Poonam ji also got us rasagula. She wanted to bring us last week itself, but we had too many sweets last week, so we couldn't. But thank you all. So we will give them a round of applause for coming. So some of these students, and I'm sure they have so many other homeworks, assignments, figuring out new place and all that. But despite that, they made it a priority to come here and take part in this in these classes. They don't even have any ride. So Sundaranand Prabhu had to go and bring them. If we have any volunteers who have some time, who can take them and drop them off, it's about 20 minutes from here towards Hayward. We would really appreciate that. And as usual, so we will go through the main door. We will come around, take our dinner plates and come back. And if a couple of volunteers can help fold this up, we would appreciate that. And at the end of finishing your dinner and sumptuous discussions, if you still have time, we would appreciate some wrap-up help as well. So if you do want to help drop them off, please see me or Sundar Prabhu after. So thank you very much. Anirudh, okay. Thank you, Anirudh. We'll give him also a round of applause. Alright. Thank you very much.
fellows explained, there are 4 levels of motivation. So fear is one. This for fear. Many people motivation or motivation of fear. Or this motivation can be for anything. Not just worshipping God. Yeah, my grace will go on to so that's so fear can be a motivation. The other motivation is prospect.
You can stop,
So the
right?
other
Yeah, I
level of
guess.
motivation